And hopefully Patrick joins us momentarily because we were going to lead in with his slides. He's here to cover the State Infrastructure Bank, which is, of course, a bank account that we can loan money to local governments for highway or aeronautical or even transit purposes. He'll go over that in more detail. I'm here to talk about advanced construction and toll credits and any other sort of local financing needs that you may have. Let's see here.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Hey, Patrick, we hear you.
I don't know. I can't get my camera to work. I finally got the mic to work. I haven't used Teams on this computer. It's my new computer yet. And I'm just having all kinds of problems for some reason. I don't know why.
Me too.
Sorry about that. I never had any problem with it on my old computer, but the new computer, apparently there's some settings thing going on here. So thank you so much, Eric, for the introduction. And hello, everybody. I'm sorry my voice is going too. I'm just having a heck of a time here. So you want me to go ahead and talk about the infrastructure bank, I assume?
Yes, please. I've got your first slide pulled up.
And I'll see the slide is up. Cool. Thank you.
I'll walk through it.
All right. Just a second here. I'm getting kind of resituated. Okay. Oops. Put that over here. All right. Yeah. So the State Infrastructure Bank is it was founded. It was really based upon Enabling Act and from the federal government back in the 1990s. We are governed by a state statute, which I have up here. The whole purpose of the infrastructure bank is to provide assistance to public and private entities for the acquisition, improvement, or construction. So basically capital projects of pretty much any type related to highways, multimodal and intermodal transportation. As long as the project is for public use. So anything that's on our system, but this would also include airports, it could include local agencies, et cetera. And the infrastructure bank funds can be used by private entities, as I said. You can go to the next slide. Oh, there it is. So anyways, sorry, I'm just having some issues here. Okay. So this kind of gives us a current state. We have the statute creates, or I should say, authorizes 4 SIB accounts: highway, aviation, rail, and transit. We've only ever had the establishment of and funds in the highway and aviation accounts. We've done a few highway projects within SIB funds over the years. Most of our projects, I would say at least 80%, have been for aviation, for airport improvements, like hangars, runways, parking facilities, anything like that, and terminal facilities, anything that enhances or improves airports around the state. And now this would not include DIA. We would probably not be ever doing a SIB loan for DIA just because we usually do loans for I'm sorry, is there a question? Okay. We generally do loans for like smaller airports around the state. We wouldn't have the resources really to fund something on the scale that we have at DIA, which is one of the largest airports in the world. So like we've recently done them for Durango and Telluride and whatnot. That's been probably most of our loans. We have about 40 million outstanding. Most of those are for aviation projects. Currently, we have a little less than 4 million in the highway account. That will be going up very soon. I think because what we did was we transferred some money over to the aviation account for so that we could complete a project, but that's being transferred back. It's being sort of paid back, if you will. So we'll have closer to 5 million in the near future in the highway account. And so those funds will come available. This is a revolving fund. So as soon as the funds are paid back, they're available for new loans. You can go ahead and advance the slide. So this is just a quick rundown on the loan process. The SIB is funded by 100% state loans, and they have to be approved by the executive director and either the Transportation Commission or the CAB, the Colorado Aeronautical Board, in the case of aeronautics loans. Currently, there are no accounts set up for the enterprises. However, any qualified project associated with the enterprises, especially like the CTIO or bridge enterprise, could be used, and also any passenger rail projects could also use SIB loans, because in fact there is, potentially if that fund becomes capitalized, could use SIB loans because that is also enabled by the statute. There has been some talk of possibly eventually capitalizing the rail account because we have so many upcoming rail projects, but so far nothing solid, just sort of talks in the hallway more than anything. So you can, oh, by the way, if you want to go to the last page, it shows links that you can go to for further information. The first one goes to our main SIB site. From the time of application to approval is usually a period of about 60 days. And that has information on how you can apply for a SIB loan. We're doing some updates to that page, by the way, because the aeronautics loans use Salesforce for the application and administration of those loans. But we just have, for highway related loans, we just have a fillable PDF form that you can, if anyone's interested in applying for a loan. There's also that second site goes to the FHWA site regarding SIB loans. The third site is a University of Maryland site that's very informative and has information about SIB programs in other states as well. Is there any questions so far? That's pretty much all I had. This is a pretty straightforward program. Conceptually, it's really quite simple. It works very much like a bank. You apply for loans. You show that you have the need and that it's a legitimate transportation need and the ability to pay it back. We go through a process. I set up a committee that includes myself and either a member of the TC or the Aeronautical Board and the CFO, and we review the loan and we'll review the application and decide whether or not to approve the loan. But it's a pretty straightforward process, not much different than applying for any kind of capital loan.
So, Patrick, I apologize. I just couldn't get to the buttons fast enough. Old guy, slow reflexes.
Yeah.
You said that the transit might be funded for transit uses. Does that require an act of the legislature, or is it just simply the CDOT board says, hey, let's move the money over here and we're good kind of thing?
Well, it would require a couple of things. It does not require an act of the legislature because the original statute that established the SIB in Colorado. Sorry, I'm going to get a little bit of water here. Also, it already gave us the authority to create a SIB for transit, a SIB account for transit. So we already have the authority to do that. So what that would take is it would take a funding source. We would have to find funds that we could use, that we could basically deposit in the account, so to speak. And it would also that will actually really that's the only thing that we need is to find a funding source. But it would also have to be agreed upon by the TC. The regulations and the procedural directive that we're under just requires that if any money that goes into a SIB account has to initially be approved at least by the TC. Actually, all the funds that go into the account have to be approved by the TC, except for the aeronautics account, which the TC basically delegated that authority to the CAB. But otherwise, yeah, if we could find funds and we could get everyone to agree to it, and that would be an initiative that would come from our CFO working with the executive team here, and they would have to get approval by the TC, and that's basically what it would take. So far, there hasn't really been any talk for transit specifically, and people often like put transit and rail in the same sentence, but in fact, the rail account would be a separate account. So if we were talking about like passenger rail, that would be one account, but then transit projects in general, like anything having to do with bus rapid transit or park and rides or anything like that, that would actually have to be a transit account. So
Okay.
there's nothing that would in statute that would prevent that from happening. In fact, statute authorizes us to do that if we can find the funding.
All right, and that's what prompted my question was when you had talked about the front range passenger rail. So things that oh, I'm hearing my own feedback and it's freaking me out. Sorry. Station improvements and things like that would be eligible. It doesn't have to be rolling stock. So
right,
that's good to know.
Yeah. All of that would be honestly, really any capital project, any conventional capital project that of the type we already do for any mode of transportation could be eligible for that.
Okay. And by the way, we don't call them park and rides anymore. They're transit hubs.
Oh, I know. I'm catching up on the lingo. Sorry.
Then you have one more hand up. Who? AW. Alyssa, I think you're muted if you have a question.
Okay, yes, thank you. I was wondering on the highway funding, is $5 million about the norm for a yearly fund amount, or does it fluctuate significantly, or how does the amount of money get determined?
It's actually, you mean, and when you say the amount of money, you mean the amount of money that we have in the account?
Yes, I suppose so. You indicated that there would be close to 5 million in the near future. I didn't know if that was consistent or if it changed or how that worked.
It does change. So it's a revolving fund. So all the money that we have right now, we actually got seed money many years ago. And all of the revenue that's come into the SIPs since that time has been from interest. So we loan the funds out, it comes back as interest, and that gradually builds the account. So that's the entire our entire fund is based on that. We haven't gotten any new capital put into the fund for, gosh, probably close to 20 years now. So so basically what I base that on is we'll have more money as payments come in. And I haven't looked at it for a couple of days, maybe a week, but we do have a couple of big payments coming in. Actually, part of it, payments coming in really on airport accounts that have to be transferred back to the highway account, and that's what I was basing that on. And then sometime that'll max out sometime in January when those have been paid back. So those are funds that were in the highway account and were essentially loaned out to the aeronautics account, and now are being paid back. So so that's what I was based that on. And I think we have like in a few days something like a $900,000 payment coming in, and then another something like $600,000 coming in January. So I think we'll have close to 5 million when that one gets paid back. But that'll be pretty much the total amount that we'll have available for the foreseeable future.
And Patrick, this is Eric. Do we have any maximums or minimums that people are allowed to ask for?
There are none written. There are no maximums or minimums that are written in any of the regulations or the statute. So it's pretty much, it's really based on availability. So if someone wants to come and borrow the entire balance that we have in our account, if that loan is approved, then they will get that entire balance.
Is there a timeline that is typical for repayment?
Oh, I'm sorry. And I'm glad you asked that, because that's one that I always mean to point out. It just depends. Sorry again. It depends on the terms of the loan, but all of our loans have been 10-year loans, and we generally, it's 10-year loans made in 10 payments, so they're annual payments. And that turns out to be beneficial to most of our borrowers, because that way they can do, as they do their annual budget, they just set aside the entire amount and they pay it all at once for whatever the yearly payment is. So if you have, like a $1 million loan, if it's $1 million and you amortize it, so I mean the total is $1 million, and you just be paying back $100,000 a year basically for 10 years. If that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, I'll feel free to interrupt if there are any additional questions for the SIB, or as I go along on my next few slides. Happy to field more questions. All right. So the next portion of the presentation is going to be about advanced construction. And so advanced construction is a funds management tool that allows a state to begin FHWA projects, or FTA projects for that matter, I think, but FHWA primarily, in getting those projects started, even if we do not fully obligate the funds right then during that fiscal year, or if we don't have enough federal funds to obligate in that current fiscal year, we can still start the project under advanced construction provisions and then obligate the funds in subsequent fiscal years. So basically, you get a project authorized just like you would a normal FHWA project, before the project is advertised or awarded to a contractor. So we would get that authorization. And then basically, as funding is needing to be reimbursed to the state government or to the local, we then do what's called a conversion, which will incrementally obligate that funding onto a project. So I made a differentiation between advanced construction is not advanced payment. We do not support a model where before any work is done, FHWA or CDOT is cutting a check to a local agency. Everything we do is as a result of a payment that the local made to a contractor, then submitted a reimbursement request to CDOT, and then CDOT eventually gets reimbursed by FHWA. So everything we do here is, the reimbursement model. So I just wanted to make sure to differentiate that advanced construction is not an advanced payment. So again, FHWA authorization before the project is awarded to a contractor is required. So local agencies often receive this as a notice to proceed from CDOT. So you still need to get FHWA authorization before notices to proceed. But, we don't have to obligate the full funding. Projects still have to be tipped and stipped. So they can be, we're in fiscal year 26. So these projects can be in your, FY28 tip, FY28 stip, etc. We can still start those projects now, so long as they are tipped and stipped, and that you still have to have a valid IGA with CDOT. Of course, those project expenditures have to be eligible for FHWA reimbursement in the future. So nothing changes in that regard. And then you still have to comply, like I said, with all the reimbursement procedures covered under 2 CFR 200. So none of that changes. So what are the benefits of doing advanced construction? Again, you can start, maybe a project that was slated for fiscal year 28. You can start that project now and avoid potential inflation costs, versus having to wait for 2 years to start the project. We have the flexibility to do it. We kind of already covered the inflation costs. And this is a good way to start large projects. If you have, let's just say, a $20 million project or something that had $5 million scheduled for each of the next 4 fiscal years, instead of banking all of that money by waiting 3 or 4 fiscal years, you can start that project now. And then as we're spending the money, we'll obligate the funds. And that might mean, only obligating $5 million this year, obligating $5 million next year, etc. But it allows you to start the project now instead of having to bank all the money. There are risks. So the biggest. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Before you go on to the risks, back on that last part, let's say the first 4 years of our TIP are fiscally constrained, and jurisdiction X has something in pinky year, in year 4. If you guys got the capacity to advance something, right, if they're all ready to go and they're just waiting for their slot, you may be able, if you've got the funding available, to advance it. And then you guys work with the MPO and we do whatever necessary TIP amendments to make sure everything stays kosher with FHWA. Just want to confirm that's sort of what I heard and what you meant. So that way, again, if someone's got something that's 100% ready to go and is just waiting for the money, if you guys got the money available, you're happy to get it out the door. Is that correct?
That's correct. We are actively constrained for 4 years of funding at a time, but it is true. We have a capability in the STIP to label something as future year funding, which could be, 5 or more years away. We would probably want to talk through if a project was spread out more than 4 years, we could talk and work those details out. That's true.
Hi, Eric. Got another question
Sure.
from Gail.
Hi, Gail.
Yeah, hi. I just want to make sure I heard this correctly. Let's say it's even within the 4-year fiscal constraint. If it's spread out over multiple years, you would allow us to advance all that so we can do the project up front and that first year funding is available without doing even modifications to the TIP. Because I think that those TIP, the balance, each year the TIP still needs to balance, right? You're just allowing us to use that future year money.
Yes, you can. Yeah, that's essentially what we're saying is even if a project was slotted to receive money from 2 years from now, and that's how it's reflected in the STIP, you can start that project today. You don't have to wait for that year to officially start.
Yeah, thank you. I think I was just restating this the same thing, but wanted just to make sure what I was understanding is what you were saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. There is a little bit of risk with some of this. I'm going to reference the carbon reduction program as an example, right? So even though our STIP is 4 years, 4 years into the future, and we've estimated revenues to support those future years, there is possibility that the federal government cancels or reduces the size of a program. And just in the current environment, I feel like carbon reduction could be a risk, right? So carbon reduction is funded according to, the US DOT's IIJA bill, funded through FY26, but there's no guarantee it'll be funded FY27 and beyond. So if we were to start a project with future carbon reduction funds, but then that program is killed by FHWA, there would need to be some sort of reconciliation that would occur, right? We would have to fund, the local agency would, or the MPO would have to find some other source of revenue to replace that project. Or if there were other projects that were slated to get carbon reduction, but those other projects haven't started yet, then those ones would be the ones that would have to go find a different funding source, right? So TAP has been around for a while, so I don't necessarily think TAP's going to be canceled. And even in the past, TAP used to be called the Enhancements Program, and there was a conversion that sort of happened when they eliminated enhancements and started the TAP program. We had to kind of evaluate the, crossovers and which projects were still eligible for TAP, yada, yada. But frankly, carbon reduction gives me a little worry that that program's going to keep going. The second thing is so risk B here is a little bit more about the changeover of a fiscal year. And so if you had got your project authorized, say last federal fiscal year, but then CDOT obligated all of our money with the feds and that money was gone by the end of September, well, just like currently, FHWA does not have an active appropriations bill right now, and they haven't passed a continuing resolution either. So we're sort of in limbo waiting for FHWA to give us more money. And so that's sort of just an annual risk that happens. And what it may mean is that worst case scenario, a local agency doesn't receive reimbursements right away, and that we would have to wait for FHWA to pass their bill before we had a chance to obligate more money with them. And then eventually payments would get, funneled back to local agency. So a little bit of a worst case scenario cash flow concern kind of thing. The good news for local agencies is you guys get reimbursed by CDOT first, and then CDOT goes to FHWA to ask for money. So this trickle effect would only affect you if CDOT was also out of money. And we were like, we can't pay you until FHWA pays us, yada, yada. But I don't think that would be a problem. Second bullet point. Yeah, if there are just so many projects that are in advanced construction that we didn't have enough obligation authority to obligate all of these projects, then those reimbursements or obligations would have to be staggered across multiple fiscal years. Again, that's sort of a worst case scenario. This is the third bullet's very important. All projects, once authorized by FHWA, should stay active. So you should always send a request for reimbursement once every 12 months at a minimum. Even if projects are, advanced future year funds, you still have to keep billing that project. We don't want that project to go inactive and then FHWA have to look into why that project even exists, sort of thing. And then workload. Be aware of, if you're bringing forward a bunch of projects that weren't really slated to start for 2 years or 3 years, is your staff able to handle delivering this project now? Is CDOT's staff able to support you in delivering more projects now, right? So those are just some questions to make sure everybody's like worst case scenario. Let's just kind of say like, we want to start every FY27 project today. Well, can we handle it all? Is kind of the question. In addition to assuming that the FY26 projects are still moving forward as well. So something to think about there.
Lachelle and her crew are always ready.
Yeah, we have a good staff in region too. Hopefully they can support it. All right, so that was kind of the end of the advanced construction conversation. I wanted to give a chance. Any other questions about that? Okay. The next concept is a different funding mechanism, toll credits. So essentially what toll credits are is a provision that allows a local or a state to not provide match to the project. And so we are allowed to either eliminate that match or use additional federal funds to make up for that lack of match. And then what that means is, like, let's just say you have $1 million project. Instead of you only being, given 80 cents on the dollar back, you could potentially get a whole dollar reimbursed back to you. But those funds still have to come from somewhere. So what I'm talking about is, let's just say you had a theoretical, 80, or it was $100,000 project. $80,000 was going to be FHWA. 20,000 was going to be local funding. If you want to use toll credits and still maintain a $100,000 project, you would have to go find $20,000 from elsewhere through usually the MPO, application process. But if Pikes Peak had $20,000 extra to award you, they can award you that full $100,000, and then you don't have to come up with the match. So, like, kind of just to reiterate, toll credits are not cash. They allow to eliminate your payments, eliminate the local from having to pay something, but it doesn't actually pay for the $20,000 that we're eliminating of that, the cash that you as a local were bringing to the table. If we got rid of that, that doesn't mean that you now have $20,000 of something to pay for it. You would have to either cut the size of your project down to $80,000 or again, ask the MPO for an additional $20,000.
And Eric, if I could interrupt you for a second, because I see a lot of folks envisioning me as a giant money piñata that they could take a whack at to get that extra 20%. So I just want to remind everybody that, again, the MPO, we don't make any awards. It goes through the TIP committee and ultimately our board of directors. So we'll have to, if this is something you guys want to look at in the future, that means if we give every single project more money through toll credits, that means there's going to be less projects because there's no, like Eric said, there's no new money. So instead of maybe doing 10 projects in the region, maybe we could only do 8, but those 8 then are fully funded with the federal share that the MPO has available. But that's a decision you guys have to sort of make and work through as the TAC. It is not something that PPACG is going to do unilaterally as staff. So again, I'm not a piñata. Don't take a whack at me. You're not going to get any candy if you hit me hard enough.
Thanks, John. So this sort of reiterates a little bit of what we were talking about. I'll give an example where CDOT is allowing for toll credits. And this is on our Safer Main Streets program. Or sorry, I used the wrong term. Safe Routes to School program. So there are a few schools that are in disadvantaged neighborhoods, and that coming up with the match would be a little bit difficult. So we know that going in. And so when they ask for $100,000, it's not this situation where they have to later ask for another $20,000. They tell us during the application process, hey, I can't afford to bring match to the table, but we still have a really good project. And at CDOT, since we sort of handle the Safe Routes Safe Routes to School awards, our management has baked in the anticipation that some projects will receive toll credits for that, the purpose I just described. And so we know that going in, so it's not them coming to bang the pinata again later kind of thing. So I would kind of advise that, for locals as well as the MPOs to think of this on the front end rather than thinking of it on the back end. But if you did have a project that wanted to use toll credits, CDOT asks that the local agency or MPO explain why and kind of give us a justification. Ideally, it would be an explanation of why the local cannot afford to bring their own match to the table, or why it would be advantageous to not require a match. So just some justification. I would show that to my manager, who's Jeff Sudmeyer, the CFO at CDOT, and he would kind of bless that. An explanation. And then I just wanted to throw out here that toll credits is essentially the opposite of overmatch. And so if you have a project where the local is going to bring like 50% of the cost of the project, that's like on the polar opposite side of toll credits. And we obviously wouldn't need to even discuss toll credits until the local reduced their contribution in that project so far that it went below 20%, right? So I wouldn't necessarily expect a call from somebody asking for toll credits if the project went through an award cycle and they were like, giving a lot of overmatch to it. And then I know John had a qualifying kind of clarification last time I brought this up, but let's just say, all things being equal, if one local agency had a project that they were bringing a ton of local overmatch to, I wouldn't necessarily expect that same local agency to then come and say, I need to use toll credits on a different project. We would instead try to work the math out so that both projects still had at least 20% match. But John, I know some clarification there.
Yeah, and again, Eric, I think all I wanted to point out was that within our region, for example, we have different agencies from the same jurisdiction, right? So I think it's El Paso County, but it could be Colorado Springs. Gail's on, you can correct me, but it's like, oh yeah, this is the Parks and Rec folks, and they're paying for it out of this budget or whatever. So it's completely different and a different account code than the Colorado Springs transportation that they're paying out of their sort of the general, not general fund, but their HUTF. And then they also have like PPRTA, which has its different things. So jurisdictions have different fund sources. So it might not be able to sort of spread everything out evenly amongst jurisdictions. But to that end, I think most all jurisdictions will be fine with a conversation of why they did it that way and can explain to you, yeah, we had to take this has overmatched because it's coming from parks money. This has exactly the right amount of money because it's coming from PPRTA. And this one, we're requesting some sort of toll credit because it's coming out of a different fund and we have more challenges piecing together the money. Hopefully that made sense to all of the jurisdictions here, because if it's you don't need to embarrass me in front of everybody, but I think I got that right.
No, thanks, John. That makes sense. And I would say CDOT goes through the same thing where, we have safety related money that has to be used on a safety project. And I can't just transfer that state safety funds over to some other project. Yeah, totally understand. The last method, this is an additional, or totally different from toll credits, but another sort of match tool is called tapered match. And this is a situation where it's easiest to explain is like, imagine your pre-construction phase that you would like to use your local funds to do a pre-construction phase. And then eventually you want to use those local funds as the match to a construction phase. Well, we can, as long as we tell FHWA that ahead of time or at the start of the project, that's totally cool. Like that way it sort of keeps FHWA off of your back during the design phase, and you can take a little longer to design the project and not have them breathing down your neck. And then eventually when you're ready for construction, you can say, see, I used all my local match in design, and now I want to apply that as the match to construction. So again, the caveat is we have to tell FHWA before the design phase starts that that's our intention. And I think that might have been my last slide. Yeah, so any other questions?
Alyssa, go ahead.
Okay, on the tapered match, I think I got it, but let me get my brain around it if I can.
Sure.
So if I expect a project to cost $10 million and I request $10 million for pre-construction and construction, but I use my match of 20% to design it. When I get to construction, I no longer have a match.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Just
That's kind of cool.
It is really cool. You know, there are pros and cons to both method. Obviously, that means you're not getting 80 cents on the dollar reimbursed to you during those initial costs. But the benefit is less scrutiny from the federal government as you're delivering that, you know, that project or that design. And then you get 100% reimbursed. I think there's actually an allowance to flip that process as well and be fully reimbursed by FHWA on the front end, and then knowingly you cover all the costs on the back end. That's also eligible. In both cases, we just have to be really clear up front with FHWA what the expectation is.
And so do we tell you with the application, or is it during the award, or at what point does that have to be determined?
No later than when FHWA sees the project. So I think the internal, like, you know, as you're setting up your IGA, your outline agreement IGA, I don't think you necessarily need to know it at that point. But then when you're working with CDOT to start your first option letter, that's when I think you need to work with Lachelle or Junior in the local agency group to tell them this is what's going to happen for this phase. And then my team has to tell FHWA in our project agreement, uploading it to what they call FEMAS, which is their information system. So at that time is when we have to tell FHWA that's what the structure of the project is.
Lachelle.
Yeah, I think for us, I think that it's important to establish this during the IGA process for us, because I would want to make absolutely clear that we, for my group, that we would have approvals from everyone. I understand, Eric, that yes, we can tell FHWA that we're doing this, but I would seek approval. I would make sure to reach out to our FHWA representative and make sure everybody's on the same page. And I think that can be during the IGA process. Like you said, before option letters, before all of that sort of happens. And I'd have to just make sure, you know, that our business office too is, because we don't have anybody on from our business office, Mary or Debbie or Jason, that, you know, that everybody's on the same page, like I said.
Yeah, and I'll also say FHWA and by default CDOT will still need proof that you spent that money on design. And what that means is essentially you still have to send us all the invoices. We're not going to be paying you any of it, right? But we still need to see evidence that you're spending your own money on design. So it's kind of weird to see what are the benefits. And I kind of threw it out there. You can kind of Google or run it through AI to find a lot better explanations than what I can tell you about what tapered match is. And so if you find an idea out there, feel free to shoot it to Lachelle and my team, and we can help look at whether this is feasible for you. Cool. What else here? I'll just take the opportunity to say I think that these tools would work the most to help you guys get your TAP program out, and probably the carbon reduction program as well, because those are, well, for carbon reduction especially, it's brand new, so it's sort of behind the 8 ball already, just being brand new. And then TAP, it seems that we're a little bit behind on the TAP program as well. So using some of these tools to catch that program up, I think is more advantageous than using it on like the STBG program. But that's just my kind of personal take. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, do we have any other questions?
Just, I want to give my personal thanks to Eric and Patrick for making this presentation twice. Just so everybody knows, they gave it once before to us as staff, and then the idea was we were going to come and give it at the TAC meeting, and we're like, oh no, we can't do this justice in 10 minutes by a couple of non-experts. So we needed to do the full hour, and we needed to have the experts. So again, Eric and Patrick, I appreciate you guys spending the time to spread the knowledge, so our folks have more tools to get the projects off paper and into the ground. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Eric and Patrick. If there's no other questions, then I guess we can conclude this meeting.